Hey everyone, welcome back to Kitsune Customs. If you're new here, my name's Ashley, I'm a miniature artist, and I'm here to make your time building miniatures that much easier. Or at least that's the goal anyway. Today we're working on the Mayberry Street miniature, the Chocolatier. So if you're ready to go from the box to the finished product, then stay tuned because we're making this right now. So the first thing we're going to do is go over everything that comes in this box. This is what the finished product looks like. And everything that actually comes in the kit. You get 2 different versions of glue, scissors, a knife, a ruler, screwdriver, tweezers, and the included instructions, as well as all the unassembled pieces. Next we have the 14-page instruction manual that we'll be referencing for the entire build. I'll be cutting out little sections of the parts to put together and their listings so that you can see right along with me making it how everything goes together. There's a great listing in the beginning of how all the wiring system works, what wires to put together and which ones to avoid putting together. Once again, you have all the included contents list and everything that's not included and that you might want to have. On the following page, it goes right into all the little parts that we're going to start making. On the back, you'll also see some nice zoomed in insets of what everything looks like put together and close up, which is really nice. The other included piece of paper is the materials list. Now, I highly recommend you go through this entire list, both sides, to make sure you have everything before you get started. And a little bit later, I'll share exactly why this was so important for me to do before I started assembling. The biggest pieces in the kit are A942 from the paper pieces, and this is A1, which is the floor of the whole miniature. I organized all the different parts of this miniature before we started so you could see exactly how many parts and how big this miniature really is. There's also extra parts that come with it, so I just sectioned those off into another bag. I also put together all the little beads that go to a bunch of different things and labeled it with what they go with. Now we're actually going to start with this outer frame here, because for this particular miniature it was easier to assemble the outer frame first and put the smaller parts inside of it. This is kind of what we're going to be starting with and making before we make anything else. Now you don't have to organize your kits like this. I like doing this for myself because I just like being organized, and it's also easier for filming purposes. So if you'd like to see how to organize a kit like this, you can click on the link that's in the description or the pop-up in the top right corner. The first part of this kit of the outer frame that we're going to do is the front window, so we'll start there. This miniature gives you a piece of plexiglass to cut out all your clear pieces from. This is A07, and I've already cut out the front window template from that piece. Now I could put more numbers up on the screen so you could see what each piece of wood is, but it was just a lot easier to put up a picture of the inset from the directions. You can always pause to take a look at those insets a little bit longer if you'd like to. Here I'm just going to be using some beacon to start to glue the outer frame pieces together. Beacon really is one of the best for gluing pieces of wood like this that I've found. It doesn't take too super long, but it's malleable enough to move things around if you need to for a minute or so after gluing. And here I'm just kind of doing a quick fit to make sure everything does properly go together before gluing all the pieces. I also like using my little ruler here to make sure everything is level and square before we start the rest of the gluing. While we're waiting for that front window frame to dry, we'll start working on the pink trim that goes beneath it. Now these pieces did end up warping a little bit, so I'm just using a couple clamps on the end to make sure they're nice and flat before we assemble it onto the rest of the front window. Make sure you wipe off any excess glue so it doesn't show later. Let it dry for a while, and we have our front window frame done. Now we'll put in the transparent film for the window. I would always lay it down first before you apply the glue to make sure you are putting it in the right spot, so you're not moving this around a ton after you apply the glue because the glue will shift with it. I also put some clamps on here to really make sure that things stayed down and didn't bubble afterwards. And unfortunately you can see I did miss a tiny bit on the left there, but it still ended up looking beautiful. Next we'll apply the wallpaper. I really like using Aleene's tacky glue for this because if applied correctly by spreading it out, it won't wrinkle or bubble on you. And whenever I lay down wallpaper like this, I always like putting it in a corner because that gives you a chance to see that it's straight and be able to smooth it out, and you really shouldn't have many issues with it lining up correctly if you're putting it in a corner. This part can get a little bit difficult, so make sure you're not using too much glue because otherwise you'll having bits come off the end, and you can, like you see here, always add a little bit more later. Next we'll work on the floor piece, and honestly I don't know why I glued it this way, because usually I suggest putting the glue on the wood piece and then putting the paper on top, but for some reason I just felt like gluing the paper this particular day, so you'll get to see how badly paper can curl up from glue and how easily it can dry too quickly. But it still worked out okay, which I'm thankful for, but generally I would say put the glue on your wood piece and then lay the paper down on top of it. And you can see it still came out pretty smooth even though we did the paper first. Next we'll work on the window, and this time we actually will glue the wood instead of the paper, and you can see how much smoother it'll go on this time. There's only a small piece for this so it doesn't glue to the entire window piece. Next we'll cut out the hole for the window. And what I did here, I went pretty strong with the X-Acto blade, and there's a couple places where the paper tore because I had a duller blade, and you can see I scraped too hard on it. But scrapes like this are fixable, and we'll go over it with a little bit of paint later on. Next we'll go ahead and put the window into the window frame that we just put together. It's way easier to put the window in now at this point instead of putting the whole room together and then trying to put the window in, so we're going to go ahead and do it now. Next we'll lay in the plexiglass from the template A934. And then we can clamp it down to make sure it stays while it's drying. Now we'll work on the cards that go in the window. We'll just go ahead and cut them and fold them. Next we can glue them into place with a little bit of tacky glue. You don't have to do this part right away. You may want to place these cards after you put in the counter that goes underneath this, but I went ahead and did it now and it still ended up working okay. Now we'll make the flags. There are enough of these for 2 sets of flags, so one set will go underneath your window and the other set will go underneath your display cabinet. So we'll go ahead and make both of them right now. After cutting and folding them in half, we'll go ahead and place these on the string. This part can be a little bit tedious, so take your time with this, but place some glue, I've been using tacky glue for this, and then fold the flag over it. Like I said, this may take a second, it took me a while, but it ended up looking really nice in the end. Next I used some 3-in-1 clear glue to get the string to adhere properly, and it didn't leave behind anything, which was nice. So sometimes you have to stretch these in order to get it to lay properly, but it should be fairly easy. Next we're going to do some touch up with a little bit of paint on that scratch I made earlier when I was pulling too hard with the X-Acto blade. I used a little bit of white paint I had from Citadel Paints. I believe this is one of their base paint colors. A nice matte finish, and it really covered up the little scratch I made. Next we're going to glue our front window piece to the side door, which is A4 here. And I'm just going to use a little bit of clear glue to make sure it stays in place. It's malleable enough for you to wiggle it around a little bit before it really dries. And I would use a straight edge on the side here to really make sure it stays in place. And make sure that A4, this door piece, is sitting on top of your front wall when you're gluing it together. And here I'm just using a little bit of alcohol on a brush to wipe away any extra glue that might have been left behind. And there's our first corner of our room. Next we're going to glue on our lace, which is F06. This is the only thing that you'll need this lace for, so don't be afraid to use the whole piece and not cut it ahead of time. You'll end up cutting it to size as you're placing it on here, but just do a little bit of glue at a time and place the lace as you go so you don't get any crinkles. Unless you're going for a more ruffly look. I wasn't. I wanted it to just be straight in the window, so I laid it flat on mine, but do what looks best to you and just glue as you go. And then I did a little bit underneath the ruffly part. Again, this was for me to get it to lay flat. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to necessarily glue the ruffle to the bottom, but I thought it looked nice here, so that's how I did it. And then just cut off the lace at the end when you're done. Again, you're not going to be using this lace again. If you'd like to save it for another project, you can, but this is really all it was used for. Next, we're going to work on the back pieces. This is the back where all the electricals are fitted, and we're going to glue our window piece to it. This is the real reason why putting the window in first with the decor on it made more sense to me, doing that first, because now we won't have to worry about putting that window and the decor in later. Now we'll take pieces A5 and 6 and glue them into our window corner. This is the area that will hide the battery box and all the wiring for our lighting. And the longer piece, A5, is what's going to be attached to your window wall. And then just use a small level to make sure everything is straight. And you can continue on with your wallpaper piece. Now, I measured this a little bit incorrectly. 5.2 to 5.3 is the real size that you're going to need to lay on top of piece A5 here. And you can see there's a little bit of overhang. So I ended up cutting it a tiny bit shorter, like I said, down to 5.2 or 5.3, and it fit snugly after that. So just do your folds where I suggested, and if you need to trim a little bit, you need to trim a little bit, but having to trim is always better than not having enough once you've cut it. Once A5 and 6 are dry onto it, then put some glue on. I used tacky for this and it worked perfectly. And then bit by bit, glue the rest of it down. I do this a little bit at a time and not gluing everything all at once so that the glue doesn't dry in one area while you're working on another. And I love using these paint scrapers. It's perfect for smoothing out paper onto wood. And the tacky glue did a great job. I love using Aleene's tacky, and Using the paint scraper to really get it into the corners, it worked better, in my opinion, than just using your fingers, and came out fairly nice in the end. Now with the floors done and walls completed, we can see how everything's going to sit on the miniature. And I actually left these walls this way for the entirety of building until we were ready to glue everything down, because it really gave us a visual of where everything goes and how everything's going to sit before it went into place. Next we'll work on the roof. This came with a ton of little pieces, so just follow along as best you can, and I tried my absolute best to put in all the numbers for everything and where they actually sat. So I hope this part helps a lot. And you'll want to make sure that the B2s are sitting on the inside of the B1 pieces on this one. And for this one, the B3s will sit on the inside of the B4s. Same with the top part, the B6s will sit inside of the B5s. Now we'll start gluing them together, starting with the first set we started with, B1 and 2. After gluing the first two sets together, we'll put the plexiglass in the middle. This stuff is really hard to get off, so just take your time with it. You can clean it with a little bit of alcohol if you want to clean it up a little bit from any fingerprints or anything like that. But for me, this plexiglass clicked right into place without any glue. I ended up adding a little bit of glue in the corners, but you really didn't need to. This fits so well into place, it wasn't going anywhere after I got it in there. And then after you've clamped those two pieces together for a while, add some glue for the top piece. And clamp that again for, I would say, a good 20 to 30 minutes just to make sure that it is solidly in place. Now we'll work on the top lamp that gets glued to the plexiglass on the inside of the roof. First, we're just inserting the wires into our lampshade, which is G12, and then we'll add the little decorative bead that's G14, goes on right after that. For the lights, I've been using hot glue. It just seems to make it easier getting the light in there without damaging the actual light itself, and it stays pretty well. And I did the same thing for gluing the G14 bead just above it. Next, we'll bend the wires to one side and glue this lamp into place right in the center of the plexiglass. And you'll want to make sure you're doing this on the stacked side of the roof, because the stacked part actually goes inside the building. Now we're just going to lay the roof onto the model for now, just like we kind of have with the walls. Everything's just kind of sitting in place to get a visual of it. And we're actually not going to place a 949, this piece of paper right here, yet, because that's what goes over the battery box when all is said and done. Now we get to the fun part, actually making the pieces that go inside. And first we'll start with the cabinet. This cabinet has a lot of little pieces that go with it, so I separated everything to make more sense to me and just make it more visual overall. I also did a lot of pre-cutting in this process, but I will share the sizes of anything I cut. Starting with the thick wire F14 that was cut into 1/2 centimeter pieces for the handles. First, we'll start with the back of the cabinet, which is D4 and D5 being glued together. Keep in mind that the side piece D5 sits on the outside edge of D4. Next, we'll do the same thing with D8 and D9, with D8 being on the outside edge of D9. After that's all dry, we'll place the D8, D9 piece horizontally along the bottom of the cabinet. And I used a clamp here just because it was trying to move around and stick out a little. Now these shelves, I don't like the way they said to do the markings. There's no actual measurements for this, and they want you to do it right away. I would actually do this later, after we've made the pieces that go into the cabinet. And I made a list of the process I feel like would be best for this. And screenshot this for later if you like, so you can come back and look at it later. So here you'll actually get to see why it was so difficult to do this. I made markings kind of based off where I thought they wanted the shelves to go, but again, there were no actual measurements in the instructions. So I just kind of placed them where I thought it looked like they were supposed to go. And I really do wish I would have made the items first before putting the shelves in, or even putting the doors on first would have been easier. Next, we'll place D5 on the other side of the cabinet and put the doors in their respective places on the front. Now, some of these pieces were actually a little bit uneven, and you can see where I had to sand down the top here in order for it to be flat so we could put the top piece on later. Next, we'll make the chocolate sauce and the gift boxes that go in the very top of this cabinet. These you actually do have to make before you close the top of the cabinet, so we'll go ahead and cut those and glue them together and place them in their spots in the top of the cabinet. These were just cut and glue pieces, so I didn't think a whole lot of explanation was needed for them. Finally, we put on the doors. Now, I actually had to sand a couple of the shelves a little bit because even with everything sitting exactly where it was supposed to, things didn't really fit properly. So I actually had to sand down a shelf, and I think sand down part of one of the doors in order for it to fit. So now this door will sit snugly inside of the cabinet. And after a little bit of white paint, it came out looking pretty nice. Next, we'll work on the chocolate bars and their boxes that will set in the top center of the cabinet. And after scoring all the edges, I was able to fold it up a little bit, and since this is so tiny, using tweezers was the best way to get this to close after applying the glue. And then with either tweezers or your nail, push in the end flap to fully form the box. Next, we'll score and fold the cases of the chocolate bars. After applying some tacky glue with a paintbrush, then we can sit the boxes into place. And I would also glue the chocolate bars into their cases before placing them on the shelf. Now we can apply the top piece and the trim after we've finished the items for the top of the cabinet. And also you can see this top piece here has an overhang. That's actually supposed to be that way so that we can place the trim easily, so make sure not to sand that down. For the next part of a cabinet are a couple more chocolate bars that will do essentially the same thing as we did with the last chocolate bars: cut, score them, and glue them together. And if you'll notice, these barely fit. That's why I highly recommend putting these in before measuring for your shelves. Next, we'll work on the gift box that goes in the center bottom of the cabinet. Gift boxes are just like anything else we've been cutting out. Score the sides, glue them together, and stack them. After the gift box is dry, you can place a little bit of tacky glue or white glue atop each one of them and start stacking them together. Next, we'll grab the ribbon F8 and cut it into an 8 cm long strip. And this is what will get placed over the sides of the boxes and glued to the bottom. Next, we'll cut F8 again into an 8 cm long strip that'll go over the width of the boxes. Next comes one of the hardest parts of this, and that's folding the ribbon into a bow. Now, I really struggled with this, so I did the absolute best I could with the tiny little piece that I had, and fortunately for me, this bow isn't really seen because after not measuring the shelves correctly, it got so squished that the bow does not show, so the fact that it doesn't really look like a very good bow didn't really matter in the end. But if you want to learn how to make bows, I would highly suggest looking up something like the fork method for tying small ribbons, and those videos are all over YouTube. Next, we'll fill this top right section with the chocolate sauce. And this is actually my favorite one to put in here because you got to fill these little tubes and cover them in foil, and I just thought they looked so cute sitting on the shelf. I rolled the labels on with some tacky glue on it. You could probably also use clear glue for this, and then I just held it on with the nylon pliers until it dried. For this, I just sat the tube in the middle of a little square of foil and fitted around it, and then I glued it into place after fitting it. And I think these came out great. Now that the cabinet is done, we'll fit it into place, and this is what I loved about doing this miniature this way, because you really got to see where things went before you ended up gluing anything. The next piece we'll work on is the display cabinet. Now, this piece actually didn't have 2 of the C14 pieces come with it. One of them was actually missing. So I contacted Hobby Lobby customer support. Same day I got a reply from them, and within 3 days they had mailed me an entire bag of C supplies. So everything from bag C plus both C14 pieces in it. So thanks Hobby Lobby for hooking me up. This one also came with a bunch of different components. We had 3 different chocolate cakes, some chocolates in bags, chocolate biscuits in boxes, a chocolate platter, chocolate lollipops, some more chocolate boxes, and the little flags that we made earlier that'll go on the front. And now that we have all the pieces to this cabinet, we can put it together. After gluing the countertop together, I laid out the pieces for the sides of the cabinet. I really liked doing it this way so it was more visual of how these pieces would sit on the countertop, and it also didn't get confusing about what went where. Both ends of C13 will sit on top overlapping C11 and C12. While that's drying, we'll work on the display case, gluing both C14s to C15 right in the middle. And I cut out the template A911 from our plexiglass, and I used a dry erase marker to place the dotted line that was shown on the template. Then I removed it and scored along the line I had made, carefully so I didn't cut it in half. Now that the cabinet walls are dry, we can place them on the countertop. Next, I put together the chocolate cakes that'll go inside the display cabinet, and I grabbed a couple of white beads out of our bead bag that used various beads all over the miniature. And just like I did with the chocolate sauce, I just rolled these around a paintbrush in order to get them to go into their circular shape more naturally. Now, at the time, I didn't think the chocolate or the black bead was going to sit high enough in these, so I actually folded a little piece of cardstock in half and then placed it on the inside as sort of a stand for the bead to go in. Now, this probably was a good idea in order to get the bead to sit higher, but in reality, it was a little too tall for the display cabinet, which you'll see in a minute. But overall, I still got it to work regardless. After gluing the cabinet to the countertop, the center didn't really want to stay, so I ended up taking some extra clear glue to the center to get it to sit properly. Next, we'll work on the lollipops in the lollipop box. Now, this one took me probably the longest of anything on the display cabinet. I put together the box the way we put together just about everything else, then cut out the wire F12 in the sizes that you see here. After placing the two parts of the box together, I used my awl to punch the holes in the little slots that they show you in order to put the wires in for the lollipop sticks. And for me, I found it easier to place all the wires in before I put the beads on. You can do it the other way around if you want to, but this just felt much more intuitive to me. And I decided to place some jewel glue down on the cut mat and then just dip the beads into it. This was way easier than trying to get a bunch of glue onto a bead and then put it on the stick. Sometimes they didn't want to go properly, but with enough patience, they finally went on, stayed in place, and dried properly. Now that the cabinet is dry, we'll cover it with the paper front piece A910. And all we're going to do is spread a little bit of glue, little bit by little bit, just like we did with the back wall. Just spread it on one piece at a time, lay it flat, make sure it's dry, and then continue around to the other side. After this, we'll clamp everything down for a little bit. I would suggest using clamps with like some pleather on the inside of those yellow pieces or something like that, just to make the clamps marks less visible. Next, we'll move on to the chocolate platter. This one was super simple. All it really is grabbing a bunch of different colored beads, including the long tube-like beads and putting some glue down on the platter and adding the beads to it. Now I actually opted for laying down some glue like this and then placing the beads on, kind of like we did with the lollipops. It made it much easier to control the amount of glue and whether or not it was drying too quickly. And the book does show you their preferred design layout for these, but honestly I just went with what I thought would look really pretty. So I put the two beads with the black and brown colors, and I put the round beads all together. Next is the chocolate box. This was honestly the easiest thing to put together in this entire kit. Just cut, score, and glue. Next is our little chocolate bags. Now, these I actually messed up a little bit in how I made them. Obviously, we cut them out and score them just like everything else, but they actually suggested puffing them out like you see in the picture here, and I completely forgot to do that by the time I got to the gluing, so I went straight for gluing it and I did not puff them out at all, and I just left them flat like little seed packets. So if you'd like to do that step, I highly suggest puffing them out before you finish gluing them so they look a little bit more full than a flat empty packet like this. The final thing that'll go on our display cabinet is the chocolate biscuits box. This one was actually really fun. You get to fold and cut out a bunch of different cookie shapes and then place them in these little boxes. And what I did was I just spread a little glue in the bottom like you see here, and then I just kind of placed the cookies in however I thought they should lay. I kind of used the template that they give you, but I mostly went off of what I thought would look nicest, and just a little bit amount of glue in the bottom still made it so that they would stick. I've never had an issue with them falling out or anything, so this worked pretty well. If they are falling out for you though, just add a little bit more glue to the bottom so that they don't fall out as easily, but don't add too much glue to where it looks like a big gluey mess. Even when it's dried, it still could look gluey in the bottom. So just play around with what works for you until they stick and stay properly. Now we can finally assemble everything on the display cabinet. First thing I did was attach the case with a little bit of clear glue and then spread a little bit of tacky glue on the inside of it to place our chocolate trays, as well as the chocolate box. Next is placing the little ice creams, and this is where I kind of messed up when I mentioned earlier that I placed those little cardboard pieces so the ice cream would stand higher, and unfortunately I didn't account for the display case's height, so it bumped it up a little bit. But that's where I placed the little chocolate, what I'm calling the little chocolate seed packets that I never puffed out. So it ended up not looking terrible, and when you look at the miniature it's not super noticeable, at least I didn't think it was, so it ended up turning out okay in the end. And just as an example, this is what those chocolate packets were supposed to puff out like. I just cut out a replica of what it probably would have looked like if it was actually puffed out. Next, we'll attach the second set of flags that we made earlier, and our display cabinet is complete. Before we move on to the other interior piece, we'll do the cart that sits outside. We don't need to cut the lace F7 right now because this is the only application for it, so we'll cut it later when we're finishing up the cart. I used my clear glue for all of this, as well as my square ruler to help level everything out. For the lace, I decided to use some jewel glue to attach it. It is a little bit tackier, and I felt like stuck better and faster than just regular tacky glue or clear glue. Once you've got it around the front 3 sides, you can snip it and you're done with the lace. Next is the little heart chocolate container. This was probably my favorite piece to work on because it looked like those little foil covered hazelnut chocolates you can get in the fancy boxes. I actually went out and bought some right after this because it was making me so hungry just working on it. Also because they are one of my most favorite chocolates, probably next to the truffles, those melt in your mouth truffles, but oh my gosh, those hazelnut truffles are literally the best. To be honest, curling all this over in this heart shape was probably the most difficult part of the whole process. Glue a little bit at a time and then use the tweezers to curl the paper around on the heart pattern. And if you take your time, it will eventually conform to the heart shape. And I don't know if you can see it here, but the paper for this was actually a little too long. So I ended up snipping off a couple tabs of it in order for it to fit properly right in the bottom. Next, we'll work on all the little foils that turn into our chocolates. I cut these out by 1.5 by 1.5 centimeters, and you can use really anything for this. I had this nail polish applicator thing, and just to get a round circle in it, and it ended up working pretty well. You could also use the end of a round paintbrush or something else rounded in order to get it to round in the center before you roll it all together. And I was just placing these in here as I made them. I didn't glue anything until I knew exactly how many I could fit. So this was just for fitting purposes, and then I dumped them out, glued the base, and then put them back in. Next up is our chocolate tower, and the ribbon F9 gets cut to 6 centimeters. First up is cutting out F5, our little foil piece from the template A919. So to make this easier for me, because I needed so many of these beads, I ended up dumping them out in one of the little metal trays I had and using some jewel glue to stack all the beads up. First thing, I just put a little layer of glue. Now, jewel glue dries clear, so I felt okay about placing down a whole layer of it when I put the beads down, just because it was going to be an entire layer of beads at the base. After that, I put a little bit of glue on the side and did the bead dipping method just to make it easier when placing the beads, just like we did for the chocolate platter. All I'm doing here is stacking them, and it took a while to get to just under 1.5 centimeters for the finished tower. Next, we'll go over the ribbon for the top of the chocolate tower, and just like the ribbon on the top of the gift box, I did not use any particular method for this. I just tried folding it and gluing it in different places until I felt like it looked like a bow. You can do it this way. I still would highly suggest using the fork method or any other much easier ribbon making method for small bows, and you can find those all over YouTube. Even without any specific method, I was really proud of how this one turned out. Now for placement of everything, I just used some tacky glue, especially on the edge of this box so that the little foils wouldn't fall over since it is sitting right on the edge, but a little bit of glue will keep it in place. I love how this little cart turned out. Obviously, I didn't end up using the fork method or any other ribbon tying method for this, but let me know in the comments below if you found a better method that works for you. Next, we'll get to our final interior piece, the counter. And just for reference, the piece D3 is sitting on top of D2. Now, for some reason, this wood was having a hard time adhering with the clear glue that I was using from Beacon, so I ended up applying a little bit of liquid Loctite and it stayed in place after that. Back to spreading our regular tacky glue over the surface and applying what I think kind of looks like shiplap as the front of the counter. While we let that dry, we'll work on more of the chocolate bars that will go on top of the counter. I had the perfect triangle that was the right size for the sides of these chocolate boxes, so I ended up using that when folding the edges. And I used the thinner tweezers this time to fold in the flaps since these were a little bit smaller than the last ones. After we finish up the chocolate boxes and the countertop is dried, we can take off the clamps and adhere the front sign. And you can see some of the marks from the clamps on here. I've said it already, but using pleather or felt makes those marks way less noticeable. Last on this counter is our chocolate tray. We're placing beads G10 and G11 together and then placing a bunch of our small varied beads on the inside of it. For the bead filling, I just dumped a bunch of clear glue into the center and then just placed a bunch of beads on the inside until I felt like it looked full. And for the placement, I used tacky glue for everything except for the chocolate tray that I used some clear glue underneath it. And that is the last big furniture piece of our interior. Now let's work on the outside. Now we'll move on to the outside sunshade and chairs and all the decor that goes around it. We'll be working with two different lengths of wire for this part of the project, F14 and F15. And there is some of this that I actually messed up by pre-cutting. So this should be a great little lesson in always measuring twice before you cut anything. Here I'm just straightening out as much of the wire as I can with my nylon pliers before I started remeasuring everything I had already cut and realizing that this piece was way too short. My suggestion is to bend the wire into shape like you see on A925 and then cut the pieces after you've bent them into shape. One confusing thing about this template is it doesn't share the sizes of the wires that are needed for each piece of the template, so I provided them above. F14 is the thicker wire, and you really only need F15 in this part of the model for the back part of the chair, which is that V shape. And this is just me going back over everything I had cut and realizing some things were the wrong size. So you'll get to see what not to do more than anything in this, and I will show how I fixed it in the end. I highly suggest the bending before cutting technique, and let me know in the comments if that ended up working for you. Next is this little wire bending jig that I ended up buying off of Amazon. I really thought it would help in this area, and I ended up not using it because bending it by hand just seemed easier. But I really wanted to showcase how this jig worked. You just place the pins in different areas on the jig, however you want to bend it. In this case, I was trying to bend the round shape there for the chairs, and I measured it out, made sure it was about the same size. And right off the bat, it just did not feel very intuitive or felt like I could really have a whole lot of control over it. So I ended up going back to the hand bending method and just doing it myself. But last ditch effort, I tried using the pliers to bend it while on the jig, and again, it didn't really do the job I needed it to do. So I ended up laying the wire on the frame itself and bending it in place, and honestly that ended up working the best the entire rest of the time I had to bend this wire. As we try to take a break from the frustration of cutting wires, we'll go ahead and cut out the seat cushions for the chairs. This was honestly the biggest fail in using this jig because you can see the wire bends up here when I wanted it to stay flat, and I ended up rebending it on the template by myself when I should have placed those pins a little bit lower so I could place another pin just above it in order to keep it flat the whole time. But this jig didn't really want to do that for me, or possibly I just wasn't using it correctly. So again, I just ended up doing it myself, and you can see it did come out pretty flat there on the right. So for all the bending I did on the template that you can see in the top right there, I just did it in little increments in order to not make it look too drastic, and it ended up bending perfectly by doing it in those small increments and just holding the wire in place. There was probably an easier way to do this, but that's what ended up working for me, and you could tell I did not have the sizing correct on those chair backs, and this was the one place here that we ended up using the small wire F15, and these came out really nice after hand bending them. I ended up bending the wire for the tables around my white Citadel paint bottle because it was the same size as the tabletop. After applying some liquid super glue to the tabletop, I started working on the chairs. Next, I attached the wire to the chair bottoms, E08, and then I found the advent of resin glue in the middle of this experience, and I started using resin glue for everything after this. So I had attached the seat cushions to the chairs, and this is flipped over the bottom side of it, and I started placing resin glue on everything and realizing that this was going to work so much easier. But one thing to note about resin glue is that it must be seen by the light in order to dry. So the UV light cannot dry it unless it's visible. So a lot of times I'll use resin glue as a cover for something, to where the glue's covering over two pieces that I want to put together, and the UV light will dry that, and those two things will then be adhered. But if you put resin glue in between two items that are not see-through, the UV light will not see it and it won't be able to dry it. So just keep that in mind if you decide to end up using resin glue, although I 100% recommend using it for metal, plastic, or anything else that's really hard to glue. And this is where you can see the back wire that created the leg was too short, so I ended up having to cut a new piece of it and glue it on manually, but thankfully the resin glue made adhering the two pieces of metal together easy, and it worked perfectly. Honestly, the biggest challenge was just trying to hold everything in one hand and hold the UV light in the other. Now you can see from this that the back legs on the left chair are shorter than the other one, and I ended up re-gluing a whole new piece of wire for that back leg. And this is the view from after I finished both chairs, one with hot glue before I got the resin glue, and the left one was after I started using resin glue, and it turned out so much cleaner. Now we can work on the sunshade, and all I did was cut it out, and now we're scoring straight lines on the bend marks of the umbrella. And at the top I snipped a little hole for the pole to go through. After gluing the shade together, we'll do the same thing to the top piece. And after gluing the base down, I used my level to make sure it was straight. Next, I folded the one book that's in this miniature. I folded along the lines that it gave me back and forth in a zigzag, glued all the pages together, and then folded it over and glued that inside the cover. Next, we'll assemble the sunshade by putting the table piece down on top first, and I really just eyeballed this to see where it would sit in conjunction with one of the chairs until it looked right. Next, we'll pull the sunshade over the pole until it fits into place. I just placed a dab of glue underneath this since it was really snug already, and then placed the top piece down after that. Now we'll make our next hazelnut chocolate box, and this is made just like the one we made for the cart earlier. Just like the heart container, this one was a little bit too big, so I ended up snipping off just a couple tabs in order to get it to fit. And I did end up cutting this one a little bit too short, but thankfully this was the part that would have been underneath the lid, so you don't end up seeing it anyways. And same process as last time, we'll cut out a bunch of 1.5 by 1.5 centimeter blocks of this gold foil to make our little hazelnut chocolates. Now we can glue that into place with a little bit of tacky glue. And then the lid down on top, so you won't be able to see that little hole we accidentally made in the back of the box. And here we're just placing bead G4 inside G13 and putting one of our little red beads on top from our various bead collection, and now the sunshade is done. And I did not see this until I was actually editing this, but I don't know why I put the two ends of the wire for the table in front of the table, but there it is. Next step are the shopping bags. Now this was just a simple cutout, score, fold, and glue together. The hardest part was really the strings, and the strings we ended up pulling apart in half just like we did for the little flags, and I used some resin glue to glue the strings down to the bags. Almost forgot. First one I actually did in tacky glue, and it took what felt like years getting this to glue down and stay down. Then I ended up using resin glue for the other two. Next up on the outside are the flower boxes. Now the flower boxes have 3 different lengths of crepe paper, one at 12 by 2 centimeters and 2 at 7.5 by 2 centimeters. And it matters what way you cut these. You want to make sure that you cut the crepe so the crease in it is vertical, meaning perpendicular to the length of your cut, the way I have them here. Now I gotta say, the making of these flower boxes was all about mistakes for me for some reason. First thing here, I really should have used double-sided tape when applying this template to the corrugated cardboard. And although the flowers and the grass themselves ended up looking really nice, the flower boxes, for some reason, were a huge issue for me. So I hope you all can really learn from all the mistakes I made with this one. Here I'm just razoring the edge of the crepe to give it a nice pointed grassy look. And I curled over the edges with my finger just to make it look a little bit more realistic. After doing it for all 3 of the crepe papers, I moved on to cutting out the flower box templates from the corrugated cardboard. This was the easy part, but the real mistake I made here was, like I said before, gluing the template paper to the cardboard, because when I tried taking the template off, like you can see here, it peeled the entire bottom of the corrugated cardboard, which is the thick part that we need to hold this whole thing together, pulled away with the template, leaving me with only the top flimsy corrugated part. And you can see here it led to a horribly lopsided flower box. So my suggestion is to either use double-sided tape that removes easily, or don't remove the template paper at all, which is what I did for the other 2 smaller flower boxes. Scoring it is still important. I did this for all 3 of the flower boxes to make sure it could fold in the spots where the template wanted it to fold. But again, because of how flimsy this was, it did not want to fold in the right way at all, even though there were score lines on it. It just came out looking disgusting. I mean, look at it. Who makes stuff like that? It looks like a turd. But unfortunately, it's all we had to work with, and I had to make the best of it, so I pulled out a ruler and I did my absolute best to reshape it, make it look flat, and like you saw before, it was curved in the end still, and it was a little droopy, but when you look at it from far away, it looks really nice. And you can see here it still has quite a bit of curve to it, but the ruler did help somewhat, flattening it out more so it wasn't as janky at least. And well, we did our best. And in the end, that's really all that matters, right? Next, we'll put together the other 2 smaller flower boxes, and I did not try taking out the template paper at all. And right on the corners here, I did take off a bit of the corrugated part so I could actually fold the ends in, which is something I didn't do in the bigger box. And it ended up working out way better and looked like a real box in the end. Now, in order to make this disgrace of a box look even better, I decided to brush in some glue and then added the grass around the edges of it. You can use your fingers for this, or grab a pair of tweezers, flat-ended tweezers, to push the grass down in there while still getting the curves of the edges. And to curl the grass over even more, I used the back end of my awl and just pulled the grass over it to just give it a little bit more of a realistic curve. Next, we'll start actually cutting the flowers, and the goal here is to do as many neat tricks as you can with your scissors and cut up the foliage until you have a bunch of little branches and stems to fill up all 3 boxes. I kept all the little pieces in a jar until I was ready to use them. Now, this next step isn't in the instructions, but after making such a flimsy flower box, I decided to cut out some foam to fit into the flower boxes to try and give them a little bit more stabilization. After measuring the interiors of all the boxes, I used the knife that actually comes with this kit to cut out the foam and the exact lengths I needed to fill the boxes. And ironically enough, this really helped the flowers stand up in the flower box a lot easier. And I don't know how these flowers would have stood up in these flower boxes without the assistance of foam, so it really did come in handy. Now we'll pull out the flowers we cut and start placing them in the flower foam. I used my curved tweezers for this to pick up each piece and just place them in wherever I thought it would look best. And this was actually a really fun end to a very disastrous beginning of making these. These ended up turning out so nice, except for that one. But what are you gonna do? Moving on. Next up are the tulips. Now the crepe paper for these needs to be vertical and match up with the length of the leaves. So I actually cut my 2.5 by 7 ones incorrectly. It should have been vertical, and you can see they're horizontal in this one. I'm finally using double-sided tape here like a normal human being and cutting them out from that. And as you can see here, the tape and the template removed without any issue, unlike the flower boxes. And here's where you can see that I cut mine horizontal and not vertical, but the leaves still came out really nice, and they curled well too, which was the whole point of using crepe paper to begin with. Now we'll cut out the wire F13 in 2 pieces at 3 centimeters and 4 pieces at 2.5 centimeters. And I cannot tell you how many times I measured this before I cut anything after going through those chairs. For the leaves, all I did was place a little bit of tacky glue, or you could use your PVA glue, something like that, on the crepe paper for the leaves, and then twirl them around the tulip wire a little bit. And I just kind of sat there and curled it over the wire a little bit until it was snug against the wire. This is how the leaves that had the crepe paper cut the wrong way ended up curling, and I think they ended up looking great even though they were cut the wrong direction. So that just proves even if you cut it wrong, it still is going to look really good. Next, I started filling the pots with the tulips I wanted to go in each one. I put a tulip of each color into each pot, and we'll end up putting some hot glue in them from the bottom afterwards. Next, we'll do the interior sign. This is more like a menu than just a sign, but all it is putting a little bit of tacky glue or PVA glue on top of the wood piece and adhering your paper piece on top of it. Onto the outdoor sign, we'll be applying some glue on the inside of this frame and placing piece A933 on the inside of it so that it shows through. And for gluing these two pieces together, E12 and E13, I used a little bit of resin glue on top. Now this does show shiny when it's dried, so if you don't want shiny glue showing on the top, I would suggest using a different kind of glue. You could even use hot glue for this if you wanted to, but it glued very quickly and ended up looking great. Next, we'll add some glue into the bottom of our pots. This is just how I did it. This time I poured glue in from the bottom and scraped it off. The flowers stayed well, so this made it easy, but you can always use clear or PVA glue inside first instead. Next, we'll cut out A936, our sunshade. And all I'm doing here is cutting through one side of this curved shade so we don't bend it. And then I go back over going the other direction to cut out the other side of the shade. After that, we'll score the curved part so we can bend it over and make our shade. I really like doing this on a flat surface just to get it started so you don't end up warping the paper. Next, we'll attach B11. Now these actually confused me at first, so just for clarity, that straight edge sloping down is the part that attaches to the shade. Next we'll move on to assembling our door, and I decided to use resin glue for this just because it was on the back side and I was laying the resin glue over two pieces so it could adhere, and then I flipped it over and attached the little wood framing pieces with some regular clear glue. Next, we'll use the template A937 to cut out our plexiglass for the door. Just flip it over and use a little bit of clear glue to adhere it in a few dots along the back. I ended up not attaching the bow because I'd had enough of bows for one day, but you can absolutely refer to how I made the bow for the chocolate tower if you'd like to attach it. And here we're just gluing A938, the Chocolatier Sign, to its board B7. Now originally I would have just painted this edge white, but I really wanted to try using the paper piece that they gave you for this, A939, and just see what it would be like attaching this thin little paper piece. And honestly, it wasn't that hard. Just put some glue down and attach it a little bit at a time all the way around the edge. Next, we'll work on the fence. This was probably the simplest part of everything that ended up going outside. Right here, I'm just laying everything out in the pattern that it'll end up sitting in. I applied clear glue to the post, and for placement, I put the middle fence pieces kind of in the middle of the post and flush with the bottom so that it would sit properly. And now we finally get to assemble everything together. First thing we'll do is grab our back wall and get that glued down first. The front wall will go on once we've finished all the interiors. I used a line of clear glue along the bottom of each wall and placed it on the base. When placing this back wall, keep in mind that there should be a small space for the front wall to go in front of this one. While that back wall dries, we'll start working on the lighted shop sign that goes out front. Next, we'll pull apart the string piece into two parts, just like we did for the flags. The most important thing to note here is the opening in B10. Now, this is where the light is going to come out. So paying attention to where the strings sit and where the light is going to come out and go towards the building is the most important thing when gluing this light into place. Next, we'll attach the strings to the sign, and this again is also really important to make sure you know which way the sign is facing, which way you attach the front and back pictures, and which way the light is coming out, because I had to redo this at least once before it was on correctly. While the sign dries, we can start attaching our furniture pieces on the inside. I'm using some clear glue on the cabinet and just putting it right into place where we had it before, sitting as a placeholder. And I'll use some clamps here to make sure that it's sitting flush, not bubbling out or crooked. Next, we'll attach the counter on the left wall. This is the one where if you had placed your cards on the window beforehand, it can squish a little bit, but I didn't have any issue with it and it only moved them a tiny bit. With all the furniture up against walls placed, we can hang all our signage. Next, I glued on piece B9 to the chocolate sign, and you can see here that I did mine upside down, but either way that you place that piece, it actually still looks good. Next, we'll place our nice droopy flower box over on the left here, and I tried to get it as straight as I possibly could to no avail. Still looked okay though. Next, we'll start wiring up the lights. The instructions have you use one hole on the back of A2 despite having 4 others, so I just use the ones that work best for me. First light we'll attach is the sign. Now I like to map out where my wires are going to go before I ever glue anything in place. Next is the street lamp. We'll use the same process to run the wires along the most hidden places and then glue it down once we see how much wire we actually need. And to do this, I just hold the wire down with my finger until it reaches the point I need it to get to connect with the battery box. Next, we'll work on the street lamp by gluing bead G16 into one of our lights. After gluing the light into the bead, I then attached the dowel rod and glued that in with the light next to it. I ended up having to get out my drill to make the holes of G8 a little bit bigger because they were not fitting around the dowel rod. All I had at the time was a large drill, so you can use that, but you can always use the smaller handheld ones like this one here that you could get off of Amazon, but using a large drill like this still does the job. For curling the brown paper that'll go over the dowel, you can use anything from an awl to a pencil to a paintbrush end to get it to curl a little bit before you start gluing this around your dowel rod. Getting this to stay on may take a little bit of time, but work in sections and start at the beginning and just start curling it, and eventually it will stay in place. Next, we'll place the bottom wood bead on, but don't glue it in place just yet. I ended up changing mine a little bit later, and I'm glad I hadn't glued it yet. Before we glue our front wall down, we'll take another look at where the outside sign is going to sit before placing down some glue and actually putting the front wall in place. If you left your gap correctly from the back wall, the front piece should sit perfectly in place over the tile floor and connect to the 2 back walls. Now we'll finally glue on the front shop sign. I used a little bit of clear glue to hold it into place first, and then I applied some resin glue around it to give it a nice secure hold without worrying about it snapping off in the future. For attaching the wire to the walls, I applied a little bit of resin glue in a couple different areas while attaching it and holding the wire in place while using the UV light on the wire. For the street lamp, it became evident pretty quickly that the wire wasn't going to sit flush to the ground or sit flat if the wire was coming out from the bottom of the bead. So I ended up cutting a small hole inside this wood bead in order for the wire to come out the back of the bead so the street lamp could sit flush on the ground. After making sure that worked, I glued the wood bead to the base first. At the angle I wanted the wire to come out. Next, we'll do a little wire testing. I usually strip my wires a little bit further than the kit gives you, and I bend them around the battery box that has batteries in it as a test to make sure all the lighting is working. Now, I actually do this before I put anything together. Generally, I check the lights that come with the kit first. I just wanted to show an example of how I do that. Finally, we'll test the shop light before we move on to connecting all of our wires together to the battery box. First, we'll glue the battery box into its place in the back of the wall, and then attach the street light to the front of the base. And we'll use resin glue to attach the wire along the bottom of the base, along the wall, and up the back to finally connect them to the battery box. I use the tweezers here to hold the wires down while gluing them into place because getting UV resin glue on your hands is no bueno. Next, we'll string our shop sign wires that we connected to the window wall through the hole on the right. Then we'll connect the street lamp wires through the hole on the left. These are the only two holes that I used. It just made more sense to do it this way instead of do the one hole as the instructions suggest. Before we move on, I do think it's important to say that for this kit specifically, the battery box white wire goes with the LED gray, and the battery box gray goes with the LED white wire. And you should test all your connections before you fully twist any wires or seal anything together. But always check the wiring section and the front page of your instruction book before you do anything. I've also had other kits that were not Mayberry Street that had the wiring labeled incorrectly. So again, it is so important to test all of your wiring before you finalize anything. Next, we'll finally add our ceiling light, and just to show you an example of how I do this, these are what the wires usually look like when you first get them. Nothing you can really attach together, right? So before I had wire strippers, I would use my miniature scissors here to cut along the plastic as little as I could, just enough to get it to peel off the wire without cutting the wire off altogether. And if you're going to use a wire stripper, I highly suggest a 22 to 30 gauge wire stripper instead of using scissors. Next, we'll glue down the fences and add the cart. Then we'll add a bunch of the smaller things that we made, and I placed them in this jar just so I wouldn't lose them, starting with our smaller flower boxes and a few of the bags that we made. Then we'll place the rest of our tulips and flower boxes. Now we'll move on to placing the tables and chairs. Now the first thing I did was just sit them down and get an idea of where I wanted the table and chairs to sit, and then placing the glue down where I had them and gluing them into place. For the table, I used clear glue on the bottom, and I used tacky glue to place the book and bags in their spots around the chairs. And before we forget, we'll place the door in with a little bit of clear glue. Now that all the wiring is done, we'll cut up a few strips of the electrical tape that came with this kit and tape them around the wires that we've strung together and place them all inside the hollow back wall. Before we place the roof down, we'll place a little piece of paper A949 that we've been saving since the beginning. And I used some clear glue on the inside of this roof before snapping it into place, and used whatever somewhat heavy things I could find to hold it down while it dried. Next, we'll place our awning. I used clear glue to attach these to the wall, and I actually had to hold it there for a little bit because it kept wanting to droop, but it finally dried down. And then we'll place our sign on the very top. You can see the awning drooping a smidge here, and so I had to push it back and hold it into place just for a little while until it really set and stopped drooping. And that's it. We're actually done with the Chocolatier. This was probably the most challenging miniature I've done in a long time, and it was so much fun. It's so cute, and I love all the colors, the decor, even that sad droopy flower box on the side. Everything ended up looking just beautiful, and I would love to make this one again in the future with all the knowledge that I acquired from making it. I really hope you guys enjoyed watching this as much as I had fun making it. It was great, and I highly encourage you to get it. and try it out for yourself. It will teach you so many things in the world of miniature making. The wiring on the back ended up turning out really nice and clean. I really hope you guys enjoyed coming on this fun miniature journey with me. Let me know in the comments if this tutorial helped and if you were able to make this one too. I'm always looking to make tutorials of new miniatures and DIYs, and I'm putting together a playlist of all the Mayberry Street ones here on this channel. Check it out and enjoy. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you had as much fun as I did making this one today. Even if it was rough in a few spots, we got it done and we had a great time doing it. Stay tuned for the next episode because we'll be working on the Mayberry Street Century Bookstore. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!